What is going on, people? Happy December. This is none of our usual recording times. We are recording at noon on a Sunday. I am joined by one of my favorite co-hosts, Kristen, aka Miss Filmingo, to talk about a trio of films that, in a weird way, these all kind of ended up being related. They're all about like sabotage and blackmail and involving elements of noir and subtle manipulation and very interesting relationships that develop between two people. Kind of funny how that ended up happening, but we've got three movies to talk about. We've got Saltburn from Amazon Studios and Emerald Fennell, who is the director of Promising Young Woman, who she won an Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay for that back in 2020. We have Eileen, which is a little film from Neon that came out back in January in Sundance and is now finally getting a wide release that Kristen, you got a chance to watch a couple of months ago at Montclair Film Festival. And then we're going to wrap it up by talking about a movie that I kind of already collectively shat upon when we did our review of all the movies that I saw at New York Film Festival back in October, that being May December. And now that it has actually hit the air, it is on Netflix, and now that the mass population has had a chance to watch it, it is definitely, I think, worth revisiting for sure. But we're talking about all of that and more. Kristen, you got anything to say before we get this started?
Nothing. Let's get into the trio.
Let's get into it. This is the Triple Threat. We're kicking it off. The first of the final 4 episodes of our 5th season of 2023. Stay tuned. What is going on, people? Happy Sunday. It is December 2nd. December 3rd, actually. Wow, I'm already getting my days confused. So as of right now, we officially have only 29 days left of 2023.
It is December 3rd.
It is December 3rd.
Did you say 2nd?
I said 2nd, and then I corrected myself to 3rd.
Yeah, I was like, wait.
I know days, guys. I promise. My calendar's right there. I try to keep track as best as possible. I try not to be like everybody else.
Who is on your calendar, Dom?
Well, in this case right now, it's Logan Roy walking away from the tarmac because I got a Succession themed season 3 calendar.
Love that.
Yes, maybe in a couple of years I'll do season 4 just so in order to remember berries for this year. But next year it's artwork about the different worlds of Westeros. So it's not quite Game of Thrones, but it's something a little different. So you guys will see that. I don't know. I should do like a calendar feature at some point. Talk about like all the different various sort of pop culture calendars that I've had in the past. They've mostly been, it was like Marvel for like 5 straight years. And then I finally changed it up. I did like Star Wars one year. I did Lord of the Rings one year. I think my grandpa got me like a Three Stooges calendar one year. I don't know. Anyways,
mine was Ted Lasso.
Interesting. Yeah, mine was Succession for this past year. So we both got the different ones. So we are talking about a trio of films that like I mentioned in the pre-podcast stream, we have all kind of have a little bit of something in common. These are all movies that are in some way it's very strange because even though one of these movies is not about women, they're all kind of like revolving. So you have a movie about 2 guys directed by a woman, you have a movie about 2 women, and then you have 2 other movies that are both featuring 2 sets of women that are directed by guys. So I just thought that was like an interesting like comparison that I saw there. And they're all kind of like, I would say all 3 of these are probably like the best kinds of modern day noirs that we have now. Noir is not really a genre that we get a whole lot of anymore in the days of Marvels and big budget explosions and streamers and such. But now that we're pretty much like fully into award season and after what I would say was probably the most disappointing November in a long time, like pretty lackluster. I'd say all the movies that I was really looking forward to for the most part disappointed. The fact that probably the biggest surprise for me that came out of that month was the freaking Hunger Games prequel is probably the funniest thing. But yeah, I think them scrapping Dune 2 and pushing that to March, it screwed over the whole month. We got a disappointing, mediocre David Fincher Netflix movie. We got another disappointing Marvel movie. We got another disappointing Ridley Scott movie. It's just been disappointments all across the board. But December usually delivers when it comes to movies. And I can say that as of right now, of the top 3 movies,
it's a pretty strong start. Definitely, because now we have entered that Oscar season. You know, we kind of entered that in September, but since the strike, a lot of these films were pushed. So here they are now.
And we're kicking off the conversation with probably one of my most anticipated follow-ups to a directorial debut in recent memory. I think the last time that I was this excited for a director's second follow-up was probably when Jordan Peele was releasing Us. That was probably the last time that I felt this way, where I'm like, you had a director that had such a smash hit coming out of the gates with their first feature that I'm like, oh man, I can't wait to see what they do next. I can only imagine that probably is what M. Night Shyamalan fans must have felt like when they saw The Sixth Sense back in '99, and they only had to wait a year for their next movie. And now we as privileged movie fans, we have to wait like 2 to 3 years in between for our next movies from some of our favorite breakout directors. But I'm talking about Emerald Fennell, who was an actress for a long time, was on The Crown, and a few years ago was one of the only people to actually get a movie released in theaters in 2020, that being Promising Young Woman. Was originally supposed to come out in April, then because of the pandemic got pushed to December, and ended up winning her an Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay. The movie was also nominated for Picture, Director, Actress for Carey Mulligan, and is probably one of the most fascinating examinations of both the Me Too movement, but also like a revenge thriller disguised as like a Me Too poster child that ended up like being just way different than anything I could have possibly expected.
It has like noir like elements to it, since we are discussing it with today's topic. So I want to really hop in here and just right now and say I'm a huge fan of Emerald Fennell. I think she's one of the great female talents we have working besides like Coppola. And I was really excited, just like you, Dom, to see Saltburn. And it was such a huge follow-up from what we saw in Promising Young Woman. I was all in it because of the cast alone. I didn't go in knowing nothing because I wanted to be surprised. So, yeah, go ahead, Dom.
Yeah, I mean, just everything about it. So, right. So after Promise Young Woman, right, I'm like, I'm going to be a little bit hyperbolic here, but bear with me. I'm like, so her next movie, I'm like, oh, it's like a movie that takes place at like a massive sprawling estate, and it's got Jacob Elordi and Barry Keoghan, and I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And then, but you're right. For the most part, other than those things, I wanted to know absolutely nothing going into this, like absolutely nothing. The only thing I knew was that Amazon was behind this, and it was going to be a lot of fun. And it was going to be a lot of fun. It was going to be very interesting. And yeah, I can safely say this after having watched Saltburn, Emerald Fennell still got it. This is one of my absolute favorites of the year so far. And
high up there for you?
Very, very high up there for me. I think this is like my number 5 or 6 of the year so far.
Wow.
I remember when this movie first came out, a lot of people were already ducking it because they were like, "Oh, the twist, it ruins it, all that." And I
don't think the twist really ruins it.
I'm chalking that up to just people just don't know, just don't expect good twists anymore, because I think that there was a little bit of time there where people were like, okay, the internet just spoils everything before it comes out, so we can't do these types of twists anymore and things. And I'm so thankful that we have Emerald Fennell for a lot of different reasons. First and foremost, the fact that of the very few female directors that we have working, and there are more and more that are coming out day by day, but there's still not as many, and there really should be more. I really think she might be my favorite. I really do.
What the great thing is about Emerald, she leaves kind of like a staple, and like you can pick that up from a lot of male directors too. But it's like the elements that I can pull off this find, and like the way you find like a Sofia Coppola film, and that's her. This is the same way I could say about Saltburn, like the soundtrack, the clothing, everything that goes into her little details, and like how she wants to tell her stories.
It's so stylized. It's so drawing. Like every time you watch it, you feel like I'm watching something that I shouldn't be, and I should look away, but I just can't help but be drawn in, And it's just
that's what I definitely say about Promising Young Woman and Saltburn, because I will say, just from watching the trailer a little bit, it really glued me in.
Yeah.
And I was really excited because I took my husband to see this, and he liked the first half. And then the second half, he was like, okay, the second half. But I was the opposite. Like, I thought the first half is pretty tough to get through. But I want to say, once we get to the second act, like the final hour, I was like, okay, I'm really into this.
The biggest thing that I noticed that Promising Young Woman and Saltburn had in common, and we'll get into spoilers eventually, but while we're right now in non-spoiler territory, was that the first half was just so engaging and interesting and had me convinced that the movie was going in one way. And then both movies take a sharp left turn, like a sharp left turn. and again, a very unexpected way. And then when it brings you back in for the twist, I think this time around, whereas Promising Woman, I really didn't know where it was going until the Bo Burnham video reveal, and anybody who's seen Promising Woman knows exactly what I'm talking about, which inevitably sets you up for the ending. And even though the ending I know was like surprising and shocking for a lot of people, for me, I'm like, okay, this is the only way that this could have gone. I'm like, there's literally no other way that this could have gone. With Saltburn, by the time you hit that sharp left turn, I had pretty much figured out what was going to happen, but it didn't deter my enjoyment at all. If anything, it enhanced it.
I didn't know what was going to happen, but it didn't turn it. I really want to say the first half really kind of like slowed me down. It's what kind of lowered my score when I was, rating this film. So, I don't know. Like maybe the more my score could probably change by the time we're having this conversation. So
exactly. Well, I think that in order to because again, we have to remind ourselves that we are putting this out to an audience that primarily does not watch movies outside of Marvel movies and DC and big budgets, So we should probably tell people, since this is an original movie and an original script that is not based off of any form of pre-existing IP, we should probably tell people what this movie is about. So this movie you would be remiss if not to realize that this is actually a period piece that takes place in 2006,
which is so fascinating and
very fascinating. And it's I still don't know if I'm mentally and physically ready for them to start making period pieces about the early to mid 2000s. Like
when I was how old were you in 2006?
2006. I turned 9 that year.
I was about, let's see,
because you're 2 years older than me, so that would have made you what, 11?
Like about 11. I was like in 5th grade at the time.
Yeah.
Oh my God. That's a time flash for us, Tommy.
Don't even listen. Listen, all I know is when they start making like flashbacks and period pieces to like 2007 and I start seeing like Transformers and like Linkin Park and all that, I'm leaving. I'm leaving. I'm like, no, I can't do it. 2007 is a year that is very, very precious to me. But so it takes place in the year 2006 and follows Barry Keoghan's character, Oliver Quick, who's a scholarship attendee at Oxford. Basically, you see him, he's kind of like middle class. He's kind of like, he sees like the rich kids in the corner and you could pretty much already figure out, you're like, oh, I want that. And he's like, sneaking and snaking his way in. And of course, the prime rich kid is played by Jacob Elordi. He's this kid, Felix. And oh man, just like that. Oh, like that's just the first 10 minutes of the movie. That's before, right? You get to graduation. The first 20 to 30 minutes is them like, really forming this tight knit relationship. This back and forth and like I feel like to not the average person, it's pretty obvious that it's like, okay, this is a relationship that will not end well. But basically, Barry Keoghan, his character Oliver, has Felix convinced. He's like, oh man, I come from such this poor, underprivileged background. I've only got the scholarship. I don't really have anything. My mom and dad are both drug addicts. And it's set to believe
that, like, he like really pulls off like this element of like, I come from nothing. I'm here on my own.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because even from the opening scene, I wasn't buying it. But again, that kept me interested because I'm like, just because of the way he dressed and acted, I'm like, he did a pretty good job as far as presenting the front. But at the same time, I'm like, there's no way. I'm like, this kid is a middle-class kid who has a normal upbringing and is just talking the talk in order to try and like get himself in with the crowd. So that was already like, I'm like, already like, okay, this kid is already proven that he is like quite devious when it comes to this sort of thing. Like he definitely has the mind for it. And then they graduate, and then he has Felix, Jacob Elordi's character, so convinced that he invites him to stay at his family's very wealthy estate at Saltburn, which is again this massive, sprawling castle veranda. I don't even know what they call it in England, but like you guys can probably imagine it, like where the rich people stay. And the movie pretty quickly becomes this not scathing, but pretty really hilarious, like indictment of the rich, kind of, again, I was getting a lot of similar elements to Dumb Money, where it's like, okay, we're finally holding the uber rich accountable as far as just like how shallow they are and how out of touch they are. And again, that's just more the brilliance of this movie, because this movie makes you think that it is going to be a indictment of the rich. And it is going to be, I'm like, okay, this poor kid is going to come in and show all these fucks what's what. And then there's one twist that happens, and then there's another twist that happens, and from there, and this is probably where we get into the second half of the movie that Dylan was talking about, the movie just goes off the rails completely, but in the best way possible.
That's when I was like, okay, so I forgive the film, for being a little bit slower now as we're going through, and but definitely that last big twist at the end is definitely what gets it. And
it's funny because like I think there was I don't remember at what point, but I think it was like at the point where you see him like at the end after he's left Saltburn and he opens the newspaper to see that Richard E. Grant's character has passed. I think that's at the point where I'm like, oh, I'm like, okay, like I'd already pretty much guessed what was gonna happen, but at that point I was like,
we saw
okay, I'm like, so this is what's gonna happen.
First thing that happens to the first family member. I'm like,
I think I guess just the only thing that I got surprised by that I didn't predict was when the planning started, because my thought was he goes to Saltburn and that's when the whole plan started. What threw me off was when the reveal at the end happens. It's like, oh, he had been planning this since he fucking put the air out of Jacob Elordi's
which was nuts to me.
Didn't see that one coming at all.
And that happens. Y'all, if you watch the trailer, that happens in the beginning of the film. And it's like, that's where it all leads to. And I was like, imagine if the kid got the scholarship, if he claims to have got the scholarship, found out Jacob Elordi was going there and was like, I'm going to make this kid be my best friend. And he was like super stalkerish or something like that.
Right. Because that's what it makes you think going in, right? Because like I said, the biggest thing that the critics said coming out of I don't remember when this premiered. I think it was either Venice or Telluride. I don't remember.
It's Telluride.
It was Telluride. Okay. So what the biggest thing that the critics said coming out of it is like it's like a twist, a modern twist on the Talented Mr. Ripley. But I remember Paul Schrader famously said he's like that again, just a lot of people just did not like the ending. Now I have not seen the Talented Mr. Ripley.
But it's very good.
But if I had to guess, the Talented Mr. Ripley, and tell me if I'm wrong, but the Talented Mr. Ripley does not end with Matt Damon's character getting everything that he wants. Am I correct in that?
I think so. It's been so many years since I've seen it, but it's a very, very good. And then if you know what happens with Jude Law's character, you would get it.
Yeah.
So.
I believe that what happens here, right, is the fact that this movie ultimately pulls a wool over all of the critics' eyes, and that it tricked a lot of people into thinking that Barry Keoghan, while being a troubled kid for sure, was always going to be justified because at the end of the day, he had the short end of the stick compared to these rich elites that he is interacting with. And then by the time the movie ends, you realize, oh no, this kid is a fucking psychopath, like straight up twisted from the beginning, like
he's like the Joker, honestly.
Literally
he also is.
Yeah, exactly. That's not even a pun because he is the Joker. So oh man, do we even how do we even address this going forward without going as well? I feel like we have to go into spoilers now.
I just feel like this is the most disturbed we've ever seen Barry in a way.
Yeah, and Barry's had a track record of playing like disturbed characters too, so it's not like this is anything new for him.
I feel like the most normal role to this date he has played was his character in Eternals, which is so sad for me to say.
He was the only character in that whole movie that made any fucking sense. So
fair enough. But with him, I was looking at Banshees. I was looking at what he had in The Green Knight. Like, he's definitely an actor who can really change his ways and manics really easily. And I give him a lot of credit for that because he hasn't played anybody that was like this demented on this kind of level.
Yeah, and not to mention the fact that I'm very impressed not only with his growth as an actor, but with his progression as well. Because I remember when I first started seeing him pop up on the scene in things like American Animals and Killing of a Sacred Deer in the mid-2010s, and then he's in Dunkirk that year too. The biggest thing, and everyone was like getting super hyped up about him, the biggest thing that I didn't get, I'm like, this kid just seems kind of whiny. You know, I'm like, I don't really get where all the hype is for him, you know? And then as I kept watching him, you know, American Animals, the biggest thing I'm still am not the biggest fan of that movie, but the performances in that started to grow on me as time went on. And then a couple years later, right, he's got The Green Knight and Eternals in the same year, and he's the best part about Eternals. And then when he is the new Joker in the Batman, and I already liked his 2 seconds of screen time in that movie more than all of Joaquin's performance in Joker, but mostly because, you know, he's actually playing the Joker instead of a shitty De Niro impersonator pretending to be the Joker.
I like the Joker.
And that's fine. You can like the Joker, but it's not the Joker. But and then Banshees is what locked me in, where I'm like, he's just a dumb kid that's just looking for love of the same 5 people of this village that he's been stuck in his entire life. And then when he realizes that he's literally going nowhere, he just offs. It's one of the most tragic arcs.
It's sad. It's so sad for his character.
And in this movie, it's just I feel like it's just his fully realized version. It's everything that he is great at bringing to a performance. It's both the innocent naivete mixed with like the really sinister. He can
either be really sinister or like innocently sweet.
Completely innocently sweet. But he's never
like Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, honestly.
But like never in a way that is like fully convincing to me. Like I'm never once convinced that he's like purely innocent. What intrigues me is how he fools everybody else around him into thinking he's so innocent. That's what really locks me in. I myself, as the audience member, am never once fooled into thinking that he's innocent. But the entertainment and the humor comes in, especially with how he is around the female characters, especially because this is another thing that also kind of ties in with not only this movie, but with the other two movies we're going to talk about as well. Just kind of sexually androgynous characters. You don't have characters that really have any form of cut and dry sexuality. They're just perfectly fine with both sexes, you know, and I feel that's the case with almost all the characters in this movie, because with Barry and Jacob Elordi, who we haven't mentioned as well, they both kind of like just seem to be comfy chilling with guys and girls, and there doesn't seem to be any labels on it. And like,
there's no labels for this film, and I think that's when everybody was like starting to begin to experiment, feeling comfortable with their sexuality, and you could see at this point. And
but I feel like it's not even just that, because I feel like even when you're trying to like experiment around, like I feel like you're trying to like figure out like, okay, which box do I fit into? And I appreciated that this movie didn't even really bother or was even interested in having that conversation. It was just like a thing, an element that was a part of it.
And I think that's the part of where the innocence of the film comes in, because they're just all high on drugs and everything, and they're just going to be like, oh, it's like the best way I could see this as is like a Euphoria type of way.
Very interesting that you bring that up. Very, very interesting that you bring that up. Because like I said, we haven't talked about the other half of this pairing, right? Like I said, these are three movies that are all about pairings between people, you know, and that's another instance that they don't really make movies about anymore. Like I said, I love back and forth to dualities between two people that like may be friends but end up kind of becoming enemies. Because like I said, that's a theme that happens across all three of these movies, where so Jacob Elordi, right, is a guy who I've talked about earlier. Again, another element of the New York Film Festival episode that I just was not a fan of, because I saw him and his portrayal of Elvis in Priscilla back in October, and was just like, okay, he's just doing Nate Jacobs as Elvis. Is this guy actually a good actor? And here I'm like, oh, because Emerald Fennell knows what she's fucking doing. She knows that we're going into this movie expecting to see another shitty, like pretentious Nate Jacobs performance. And she does a very, very good job of framing Elordi as this like very divine, almost like godlike aura presence that Keoghan just worships at the feet of, and has Keoghan fucking doing some of the most outrageous things I've ever seen anybody in a movie do. Like, you want to talk about all sorts of crazy, depraved shit. Yeah. God damn. Like, I think Keoghan takes the cake here, but literally, the movie fools you into thinking that Elordi is going to be this stuck-up, pretentious trust fund kid, silver spoon up his ass, and he is. But the biggest surprise comes from the fact that he is just another guy that's being manipulated into Keoghan's web of lies. And if you think about it, he's the only one that finally sees through Barry Keoghan's bullshit.
Yeah, finally, I'm gonna just do the spoiler.
Yeah,
but when they're they're singing like the Killer's song, like that's just one of the huge popular songs. And my favorite, I think it was Mr. Brightside that was playing in the car. So they're all singing, and then once they get, it's a surprise, they're going to see Barry's parents.
Yeah, Oliver's parents. Yep.
Oliver's parents, excuse me. And then that's when it all just lays out in like 5 minutes.
And you think it's done. And you think it's done. And like I said, when we got to that point, like I said, I love movies like that. I miss movies like this because it's movies that I feel like I'm actively having a conversation with. Because even though I'm predicting everything that is happening, because I've just spent my entire life watching movies, and because this stuff is basically second nature to me at this point, I'm still intrigued because I'm like, yes, this is where the direction that the story should be going in. Yeah.
And that's definitely the big twist that really got me into it. And I was like, this is what we were waiting for.
Right.
And I felt like it was like really hard for me to get like not enough to say I was invested, but I was just like trying to figure out why I need to care about Barry, you know, his character. Because I feel like, okay, you know, this kid comes from nothing. I get it. He's kind of coming off as lonely, but
the movie's also like playing with that as well, because like I said, because of the fact that you don't necessarily buy into what he's saying, and because in a way the whole I came from nothing has kind of been played out a lot, if anything, like I said, the fact that he does come from like a pretty reasonable middle class home. Again, it's not Saltburn levels, but like he grew up pretty reasonably well,
pretty modernly. Well, for like before the stock market crash.
Right, exactly. But there's one thing that was true. There's one thing that was true of all the things that he's telling Felix in the movie, which is that again he is that his parents corroborate with him, which is that he is extremely smart. And extremely intelligent.
And you find out he's smart. He has sisters. He's got like loyal parents who just care about him.
And that's when you realize and like I said, Elordi realizes who he's dealing with. And and again, he's about to make the moves, and he's like, "Listen," he's like, "We made plans to celebrate your birthday party, and then you are out.
Then you're gone. You gotta leave.
Like, we want nothing to do with you." And that is, and like, there's already been plenty of fuckery that's been happening on Saltburn. Like, we haven't even talked about Felix's sister Venetia and that whole scene in the moonlight. With you know what scene I'm talking about, or with the what is his name with the Falsey, whatever his black cousin who's like not his cousin but is. And we haven't even
it's like I didn't really see him as a cousin. I saw him more as like that friend that like
that character who I'm just like at a certain point I was wondering
like Barry like assaults in the bedroom. I was like, what the hell is going on?
I was like, what the hell is this guy even doing here? And then I'm like, oh, he's just there to be like the constant reminder that Barry's like, oh, you ain't shit, all that.
He's like, I'm coming after you, and then later he gets kicked out, and Barry doesn't.
And then the birthday party happens, and then everything goes to shit because they find Jacob Elordi dead in the middle of the maze. And then just one by one, the Saltburn people start dropping like flies. And that, like I said, everybody else is like surprised and like probably still trying to figure out. In the meantime, I'm like, okay, the twist with the parents is a reason why they did that. They're telling us that this kid is fucking insane. You know?
Here, and I will say this: if you miss Euphoria, go watch Saltburn in the last 40 minutes of when that party happens, because that's the most Euphoria-like looking Sam Levinson element I've seen in the last year. That's like related.
Not to mention, we mentioned Nate Jacobs, and we know that I have definitely mentioned that Nate Jacobs is a mastermind when it comes to blackmail and concocting these ridiculous, elaborate plots. Man, he should look at this fucking movie and take notes because, oh man, the level of trickery that Barry Keoghan pulls off. I mean, you just want to. First of all, I don't think I am ever going to get to be able to hear, "Oh, but I'm a vampire," any other way. Now, I was just like that whole thing. I was just like, "What?" Oh man! And then, like I said, the scene with Falls. I can't remember the guy's name. Played by the dude from Gran Turismo, who is British, but was doing a pretty heavy American accent. I was interested in the choice there. We haven't even talked about the parents portrayed brilliantly by Richard E. Grant and Rosamund Pike. Rosamund Pike, who gave arguably, I would say it's between her and Natalie Portman as far as given the best lead female performance of the 2010s possibly, and then just disappeared and gave like a sort of kind of similar performance to Gone Girl with I Care a Lot, that movie that came out in 2021. But I feel like
finally got her a Golden Globe, which was well deserved.
I feel like she just kind of disappeared off the map for a bit.
Well, she to be fair, she did there was a movie called The Private War.
Yeah, she did do that movie.
She did a movie. I think she did a movie with David Oyelowo. It was like a romance film. I forgot what it was called, but I remember being advertised. And then she's also in The Wheel of Time. So I feel like she was trying to experiment with her skills and find the project that she wanted. I'm chalking the wheel. So happy with her getting casted in this film.
Yeah, I'm chalking The Wheel of Time up to a paycheck because I can't imagine that role is like super satisfying as an actress, because she's just like, I mean, obviously she gets to be the lead and like the main mentor figure to all of these kids, but for the most part she's just standing there and it's like, haha, magic stuff coming out of my hands.
I know. Too bad I can't have my husband come because he's not here.
I tried watching
about The Wheel of Time.
Listen, I'm reading the books. I understand their importance when it comes to fantasy storytelling, and it does seem like an interesting story. I did the first 4 episodes of the first season. I'm like, I can't. I can't. So, but yeah.
No Robert Jordan. Once you hit the
Robert Jordan. Oh yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's 14 books, and those things are thick.
They're right here. Oh my God. This is my husband's bookshelf, y'all.
Wow.
Like, this is
it's that stack of unfinished books that I have.
And then this is mom. And then here, y'all. Just side note.
Oh, it's so adorable. You have 2 separate individual bookshelves. That's adorable.
That can't get any more husband and wife films and then books.
Oh my God, you guys are the perfect couple. You guys are the perfect couple. But anyways, back to Saltburn. Dude, for me, the thing that locked in Rosamund, I mean, Rosamund Pike, first of all, like I said, I was so happy to just have her back. Cause like I said, it's between her and Natalie Portman in Black Swan is having the best performance of the 2010s. But the minute that she comes in, and first of all, I was not expecting Carey Mulligan to be in this movie at all. And she's not in it for that long. But when Carey Mulligan
is a very quick second, and it's like,
but when she pops in, and just the way that Rosamund Pike is talking about everyone, and the way that they're talking all this shit about Oliver's family before he even walks in when he first gets to Saltburn, and just like again, you want to talk about like just drawing you in, and they're just and he's walking through just like the massive estate, and at first you're like, whoa, this is something that he's like never talked about. But like when he's like first has his one-on-one with her and is like already starting to like run, like again, this is how amazing Keoghan is. He's like, he is a snake. He's like, I know exactly how to manipulate every single one of these people, and he does to a T. And like I said, his interactions with Venetia, the sister, are unbelievable. His interactions with Folly.
I want to say the best part of their interaction is when, spoiler alert, everybody, is when there's a bathtub scene. And that bathtub scene got me. I was like, because my AMC has the lounge chairs. I literally went back like this, and I'm like, what the fuck?
So wait. With bathtub scenes, are you talking about when he has the blood?
Not the bathtub scene, not with Jacob. The one with
Venetia, the sister.
The sister,
and
with her, and then
that.
I don't want to say it because I don't want to get you demonetized.
Yeah, we already spoiled the Lordies. I feel like we can't talk about the rest of the second half of this movie without like spoiling the rest of it. But oh my God, that scene, and especially that it happens so quickly afterwards too. And like, it is a little bit of one of those things where we talked about this with Fall of the House of Usher, but Fall of the House of Usher kind of gets away with it because it's got the supernatural elements involved to it. This has no supernatural elements to it. But there was a certain part of me that was just took me out of it a little bit, where I'm like, if it was this many people dying within such a close proximity, wouldn't that be just a little? Wouldn't somebody be like, huh? Like, so that stretched the believability a little bit when Venetia dies so soon after.
Yeah, and then you're like,
after
what?
Felix, but it is the fact of like, okay, so he blamed Felix's death on Folly, and then Venetia, he put the razor blade, so and she pretty clearly killed herself. So I think it was just the fact of they were ambiguous at first about how Venetia died, and they didn't show the razor blades until the reveal at the end. So I guess that's kind of where a little bit of the believability got lost. But other than that, man, and I mean, just one of the most satisfying endings ever, because again, even though Keoghan is an absolute psychopath, and really the only thing that oh my God, what were their last names? And really the only thing that I believe it was the Cattons. Really the only thing that the Cattons were guilty of were being rich and being out of touch and just inheriting all this money from their ancestors.
Right.
Man, just
not knowing.
You still feel some sort of vindication when he's just dancing through that manor at the end.
That scene has to be one of the most. I haven't seen a scene like that. Let me tell you, since like where the kind of like the bad guy gets away with everything.
Right.
Since is like Joker, but I feel like that's like so extreme.
But Joker's different because Joker to me is a big. My problem with, and I've told you this before, my problem with Joker is it is trying to make you feel so sorry for that guy and like totally justified in all of his killings. And I'm like, yeah, but he still killed people. Here, the movie knows that the character is shitty, and it very much knows that the character is a psychopath. Yeah, and it's kind of, again, it's like the anti-hero. It's Tony Soprano, the Walter White thing. It's the fact that because they have such sympathy, but because you know that they are a shitty person. I think that's the biggest difference,
Okay.
It's so weird, like in order to like.
But I guess where it's like the grandioseness of it, when you see Barry full frontally naked,
full frontal too, just showing up, also
just dancing his little booty off to Murder on the Dance Floor, and I haven't been able to stop listening to that song.
Really, the first indication that they should have known that this kid was a fucking liar was when they saw it's like, oh, I'm so poor, Oxford, this is all I have, and I'm like, really? Because that body says otherwise, because he is in shape. Let me tell you.
That man,
like, that
he's
says
into
otherwise.
His workout stuff. I follow him on the Instagram, so you got to go follow him. I mean, that man. He works like Tom Hardy.
He works out.
He is not afraid to work it out and show it off.
Yes, but man, I mean, oh man, just I don't even know what else I can say about this, just because I'm like, go watch this movie, please.
And I'm happy to say I think you liked it more than me. I still really enjoyed it. and I'm kind of bummed because it wouldn't have made my favorite films of the year because I was so excited to see this, but it falls kind of short because of everything. So what is your final grade?
So I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. It was not a perfect 5 for me. There were a couple things that held it back, but I think the reason is because, like I said, I went into this movie. So actually, fun fact, I actually got to this movie a couple minutes late. I missed like the first 5 or 6 minutes, I think.
You missed a lot of stuff then.
I don't know. I feel like I came in and I'm like, I understood absolutely everything that was happening. But the biggest thing that to me that was apparent was I'm like, okay, I was able to not predict completely, but figure out pretty much everywhere where this movie was going. And yet it still locked me in. It just completely kept me hooked with all the crazy shit. Like the bathtub scene where the amount of scenes that involve bathtubs that are just some of the craziest shit that you will ever see in your life in this movie are insane. But
gotta Lysol that bathtub after.
I mean, they got maids, they got a full cleaning staff, so you know that bathtub is clean enough to eat off of. But oh man, yeah, 4.5 out of 5 for me. Absolutely had a blast. Heavily recommend that. Again, just the scene at the grave, all the scenes in the bathtub.
Oh my god, the grave scene. We didn't even get to talk about the grave scene.
The scene at the end where he takes her off life support. Oh man, I gotta shut up because I'm gonna spoil this.
Yeah, don't do reveal anymore. But
oh man, yeah,
definitely is something. A feast for the eyes. I gave the film like a 7.5 out of 10, like a B.
Yeah. But it's not in your top 10 though.
No, it could have been. I could recommend it at the end of the year, like as recognition, but excuse me, definitely it would just fall so short.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah, of course. Well, so now we're gonna move on to the next of the movies about an interesting pairing and about a lead character who may be a tad bit more psychotic than it would let you on. Eileen. So, Kristen, you got to see this movie early. You saw this at Montclair Film Festival. We didn't get a chance to talk about it the last time, so I'm gonna let you lead this one off. Kristen, after you saw Eileen, what were your initial thoughts?
Okay, so to get some context, I also read the book because it's based on a book. And it also premiered at Sundance earlier this year. And it had some pretty good reviews. So I was like, let me check this book out. Let me see how it is to go see it. And I felt I knew what I was going to expect going in, given the fact I read the book. I knew something like Anne Hathaway was going to be like this kooky person, but definitely Thomasin Mckenzie comes off as the most crazier one in the film.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Yeah.
And it's pretty good. I will say it's pretty good. It just falls kind of short for me a little bit.
Literally falls short.
And I will say that literally the book is also compared to like a Hitchcock film, like book. And you could say that about the film. It has like very much Hitchcock related elements to it. Like given the fact that it's only like almost like a 90-minute film, and that's how Hitchcock liked his films, were like an hour and a half, so that you could save the time, figure out the mystery, bam, 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 bam. And that's what this film kind of does. And it has like the same elements of like a blonde bombshell. And yeah, go ahead, Dom. I don't want to keep.
Yeah, so I've got an interesting story behind this one. So I woke up. So we have been recording this podcast since roughly a little bit after 1 o'clock. So I woke up at 9:30 this morning. I jetted out of my apartment. I got on the train, made it to the AMC in Lincoln Center, which if you guys knew where I lived in Brooklyn, you would understand that's about an hour-long commute.
Oh,
so I got there right when the movie started, and I watched this movie. And again, I was so intrigued. I was so entranced. I love Thomasin Mckenzie. I've loved her since I saw her really in Jojo Rabbit. She's been in a couple things.
She's definitely a star performance.
Definitely one of the best 30 under 30 stars. Unfortunately, if the idea of movie stars still existed, but
don't forget she was also an old.
Well, she wasn't old. Yes, my favorite bad movie of 2021, and what's it called? And I know she was in that movie with Ben Foster, Leave No Trace, in 2018. But so I see that movie,
and she was in whatchamacallit, Last Night in Soho.
Yes, also an underrated one. I know Edgar Wright hasn't been as favorable since he left the Cornetto trilogy, but I've liked both of his movies that he's done post that. So I've been looking forward to this movie since I heard about it at Sundance. I was very sad that there were no virtual screenings available because I'm like Thomasin Mckenzie and Anne Hathaway. I'm like, I don't even care what the premise is. I'm like, if it's going to end up being, I thought it was, again, going in, like, I thought it was going to be like a lesbian drama. And then it turned out it was not that at all. Like, at all.
I feel like It kind of is, given the fact that not only that it's been played at a lot of like besides Sundance and like other film festivals, it's been played at a lot of LGBTQ film festivals, which I also want to acknowledge since I got like press notifications for that. So I just want to acknowledge that, but I understand why it could also be argued.
I guess just my sense of like, I feel like that is just, again, it's putting this movie in a box because I feel like going in, people would expect that this movie is going to be something like Carol. And again, not that at all. It is about as far as
it looks like Carol.
Very much so. It was kind of disconcerting, especially considering like with the blonde hair and the very, very classical way that she's performing. Anne Hathaway is throwing out a lot of vibes of Kate Blanchett. You know, they are kind of synonymous with Kate Blanchett and Rooney Mara. Ironically enough, Carol also directed by Todd Haynes, who directed May December, which we were talking about next. But yeah, so in order to basically give a breakdown of what this movie's about, Thomasin Mckenzie plays the titular character Eileen, who works at this prison in the 1960s. Doesn't really have a lot going for her. She kind of, again, she has this ritual. She goes to work. She takes care of her drunken former police chief father, Wiggum. Goes to the beach, views other people and connections. Doesn't really have any connections. Doesn't really have any friends. Kind of looked down.
Doesn't know how to socialize.
Doesn't know how to socialize at all. And in comes her savior, this new prison therapist, this blonde, captivating bombshell played by Anne Hathaway in all of her gloriousness. Can we just finally solidify that regardless of your personal thoughts on Anne Hathaway, she kicks ass as an actress?
She does a really good job with this film.
She's never given a bad performance to me.
I will say that, like, I was kind of like curious why they kind of casted Anne Hathaway for this, but with the performance that she gives for this movie, it's literally to the T on how she is in the book.
It's out of this world.
I will say that.
It is absolutely out of this world. And the minute that she walks in, and again, the biggest surprise was I'm fully expecting Anne Hathaway to be like the temptress that finally exposes Thomasin Mckenzie to the real world and all of that. And she does to an extent. But what happens is that awakening may awaken some other urges in Eileen that again just makes it just a little bit easier, because throughout the movie is having these like frequent cut tos of her like daydreaming, and her daydreams are not exactly that indicative of her being stable to begin with. Some of them just include her committing suicide or what's it called, or having one of the male prison guards grab her and start just like voraciously, having sex with her against the prison wall, or in this case, shooting her father.
That's her prison crush. I will tell you that.
I think it's very telling that this movie is set primarily at a prison, because it's the underlying theme of the whole movie, where again, this is a character who is literally just finding a way to break out of her prison, and by the end, she does. But I think the biggest thing that kind of holds this back from like being its true this movie has the potential to be great. It's very, very good for what it is. It was very good. It was never a moment where I was bored. I love the relationship, the back and forth between Hathaway and Mckenzie, probably one of the best 1-2s of the year. But man, the thing that held this back is it felt like a half hour too short. It felt like a half hour too short. So the third act comes, right? So you have all this build up, all of this building up between the two of them. They're hanging out, they're getting to know each other. Then Anne Hathaway just leaves out of nowhere and just kind of like stuck taking care of her dad again. And her dad is like, it's just very back and forth, very emotionally abusive, alcoholic, bitter, constantly makes fun of her. Oh, you never did anything with your life, all this, yada, yada, yada. And, she's giving like subtle hints at her backstory, all that. And then Anne Hathaway comes back. She invites her over for Christmas. And again, just another instance where the movie just takes a hard left turn that you are not expecting. And again, it reveals some secrets about this one male prisoner that Anne Hathaway has been seeing and attempting to treat. And I'm going to let you take it from here, Kristen, because you actually read the book that this is based on.
Yeah, I'm going to give more context to Eileen's character. She seemed like a bright kid, but once it's mentioned in the book that and in the film that her mom is no longer here. She got sick. She left school to take care of her mom.
Yes.
And she goes off from there, and that's when the mother dies, and that's when the father begins to lose it, and that's where you really see Eileen. It's told from that perspective, from what I understood from the book and got from the book. And I already forgot the name. Oh my goodness, of Anne Hathaway. Oh my goodness. What's her name?
Rebecca.
Excuse me.
Rebecca St. John. Yes.
Yes. Rebecca. Excuse me. I was like, wait, what? And ironically enough, there's a Rebecca connection, if you just remember recently.
Yeah.
With the thriller elements. But oh my God, I forgot where I was going with this. I'm so sorry. Yeah, from where we see from when Anne Hathaway is invited to not Anne Hathaway, but Thomasin Mckenzie Eileen is invited for Christmas.
Yes.
You find out a lot of stuff. I don't know if you want me to reveal like what happens.
By all means, honestly, probably because it'll probably add more context.
It turns out that this prisoner that Anne Hathaway was treating had some stuff going on with his family. A lot of abuse going on, some stuff going on. And it turns out that that's not Anne Hathaway's house where Thomasin Mckenzie is like having Christmas at. It's at the prisoner's kid's house, where his house he grew up in. And then you're like, what do you mean this is not her house? And then in the basement is the kid in prison's mother in the basement. And then you're like, oh, crap.
Yeah. Oh,
you're like, what? You thought Anne Hathaway was this like saint trying to treat these kids and taking in Eileen as like her only friend. But no, she had sinister plans to help this kid out and not have these demons held, and having that kid's mother be held accountable for not doing anything. And a gun is involved and stuff happens in the basement. Lots of yelling, screaming, potential dead body, which it probably is in the end, and then you find out Rebecca just dumps Eileen. She's like, we're going to get out of this town together. We're going to go to New York. We'll figure this out together. Thomasin Mckenzie says, I love you, Anne Hathaway.
Yep.
And, like in typical blonde shell action, she just leaves after doing her dirty business, and it's left for Eileen to
the minute that she says, oh, you go ahead, I'm just going to stay behind and clean up the evidence, that's when I'm like, oh, she's never going to see her again.
Yep. And that's what it kind of happens in the book. And I was like, girl, you're not going to see her again. Like,
yeah, it's not happening. But at that point of the book, you were probably wondering, you're like, okay, so that happened. That's a pretty big event. So what's going to happen next? Then you turn a couple pages, you're like, wait, that's it? There's nothing else?
I will say, and that's what the biggest because like, I'm going to just acknowledge this book. This says it's what a Penn Hemingway Award, and that's in honor of Ernest Hemingway. And I was like, what the hell? This book does not even deserve that. This book falls so short of exceeding what it wants to do. And I
made that pun earlier, but I'm like, yeah, it literally falls short because the way that it cuts off, I'm like, wait, that's it? I'm like,
and it falls short from everything, and from not just the book, the film, and you find out Thomasin Mckenzie just is going to drive off into the sunset or morning or sunrise.
No consequences, no body, she just says bye to
nothing. She gets away with crime.
I mean, in fairness, she does do a pretty good job of covering it up. I mean, she leaves the car with the body in it, and she lets it fill with smoke and whatnot. I'm like, okay. So you can make the case that like she died from suffocation, but that still is not going to explain the giant gaping bullet hole in her shoulder. But
they're gonna be like, what? And then they might, and they're like, nowadays they can trace back to like where the gun and who's had the gun with the bullets.
It's set in the 60s, so obviously DNA evidencing is not what it used to be, but is not what it is now.
Back then, I'm saying they probably wouldn't have been able to figure out. It's like today they probably could and find Thomasin Mckenzie and Anne Hathaway in a heartbeat.
In a heartbeat, exactly. But yeah, so it is interesting. Like I said, it wasn't enough for me to like fully dislike the movie, but it was just one of those where I'm like, huh? At the ending, So like I said,
you just take a nice little breath and go, okay, that's how it ends.
Yeah,
it will
go home. I don't want to use this to detract from the movie because the back and forth in the acting between Thomasin Mckenzie and Anne Hathaway is so good that it really does carry you through a majority of the movie. And I will also give a shout out to my guy Shea Wiggum, who again is just that guy that just pops up as like this character actor in all these different parts. Eli from Boardwalk, what's it called? Eli Thompson from Boardwalk Empire, always. And also, again, just had these 3 micro parts in these 3 completely different movies back in 2018 that were all great. And so it's good to see that he's still going. I know his daughter actually is acting as well. His daughter was in the Punisher TV series. But yeah, Eileen, overall, a movie that will probably only come and go, but is worth noting for the performances and for just the subtle, creepy, twisty nature. And also just to me, so if Saltburn is the idea of don't underestimate somebody, this is a further extension to that, but it's also the idea of don't keep somebody in a cage for too long because they're probably because eventually they're
gonna explode and
they're gonna explode and the cage is gonna explode with them. So if that's the moral to take away from this movie, then that is what I would say it is. So I'm giving this movie a 4 out of 5. But what's it called? So now, real quick, what would you give this movie?
Kind of in the same score as like Saltburn, but maybe a little bit lower because I just wasn't fully like happy with the way how everything, like, I know not every film needs a solid conclusion, but it needs to be justified, and nothing feels justified here, at least for me. So I'm giving it like a 7.
I wouldn't say it's not justified. That's not the word I would use. I would say that it comes off as there's a lot left on the table. So I would say
it doesn't, like, it like allows you to make up the ending to your own interpretation,
right.
But given the fact I read the book and knowing how it ends like that, I was like,
unresolved is the word that
it doesn't feel resolved here, even in the film. Like I thought we could have gotten a little bit more of a resolution, but we don't, and it kind of deserves it.
Yeah. It absolutely does deserve the type of movie like this. Absolutely calls for it. Just seeing the reaction. It's like, okay, what would this have done to her dad? What does Anne Hathaway do? Because after Anne Hathaway goes back to that house, we never see her again.
You never see her again.
Does Thomasin Mckenzie go on the run? How long does she stay on the run? Does she potentially try to seek out revenge? What does her new life look like? There's like so many different questions and possibilities as far as where this could have gone that I'm just like, man.
And I know it's just like, that falls short of that for me. So it's like a 7 out of 10. Maybe like a C+, maybe.
Yeah. Like I said, I would give it a 4 out of 5. It's not low enough to be a 3.5, but I would say it's a 4 out of 5 for me.
Okay.
So,
cool.
And now moving on to the final
movie of the trio.
This. Yes. So May December. So as you know, again, everybody in the podcast can say I am a giant hypocrite. I will fully admit now. I can say now after having rewatched this, I started rewatching it last night. I got through about the first half. I'm gonna finish it later on today, but. Fuck, this might be one of my favorite movies of the year now after rewatching
Now that you changed it?
Now that I changed it. No, okay, so I'll explain it. So, as you know, and as a couple of people know, I fell asleep during my initial screening of this. It had been a long day. I was very, very tired. I couldn't focus on it at all. And just the first 10 minutes of this movie when I watched it, you want to talk about just emulating Hitchcock with the score, with that overly ridiculous score. And the snap zooms and everything, like
the snap zooms are so stupid.
They're so stupid and dumb. And I couldn't. Oh my god, my jaw was on the floor because I'm like, I don't know if this movie is trying to make fun of this or if it is like trying to take this seriously. But I think it like hits it like perfectly down the middle, right? I'm not gonna repeat anything that I already said on the podcast about it 2 months ago because anybody who has seen this now that is on Netflix can watch this, but. Oh my God, there was just something so much more captivating and so much more interesting about the characters that I just could not get before. Charles Melton's whole performance, how you want to talk about playing a guy. You want to talk about a guy, absolutely, but you want to talk about a guy who is just in a cage and knows that he's in a cage the whole time and is just like slowly becoming more and more aware of it. Everything that Natalie Portman is doing, and just like you want to talk about, they say that you literally have to have like no feelings or conscience in order to be an actor, and you want to talk about just nailing that completely. And Julianne Moore's character as well, the fact that she is this character who has committed this unspeakable atrocity that they are just kind of living through normally as if like nothing happened, but still kind of has the like I said, when Natalie Portman is talking about it with the lawyer character, and then with Julianne Moore's ex-husband as well, that the father of her first group of kids, where you're just like, man, she still doesn't think that she did anything wrong. This is just her in her mind. No, it does such a brilliant way of just capturing different characters' inner psychoses and placing them on the surface, where it's like they oh man, I don't even know how to describe it in terms of just like, because there are so many different elements and times where this movie could go wrong. And I'm just realizing just how much I miss and just how much how much context is necessary in order to like really get a firm grasp of that. Have you rewatched this?
I haven't rewatched it since, and I kind of feel like maybe I should, but I haven't urged myself to get the idea to, because the one thing that really bugged me, and I guess that gives credit to Julianne Moore, is how she doesn't give like the sense of she didn't, like what you said, didn't do anything wrong, and just knowing that would give this person kind of like a spotlight for a character like this, knowing that she got away from assaulting like a minor.
Yeah.
And that, like, to me, it kind of like not essentially like gives a light and not tries to glorify it. I'm trying not to get in a way where it's like,
I wouldn't say that it glorifies
it's not glorifies it though, but it's just like giving it
it
like, it's like not like so much glorified.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm using the wrong word for it.
Is it the fact that it's not really indicting it either is the issue?
Yeah, I think that's the big thing from me for that. Because
so that's an interesting point. And to that, I will say, if anything, and I because you're right, because I think that's kind of what threw me off too at first. My issue was with it the first time that I saw it was I'm like, okay, nothing really happens. And I'm realizing now that that's because I fell asleep and I missed like a decent amount of things that actually were important to it. My thing upon rewatching this is that I'm like, okay, so the movie, is not glorifying it, but it's not indicting it either, right? But what is it doing, right? Natalie Portman's an actress who is studying her because they are making a movie about this. So and what is it actually trying to say?
Bugs me about that, too.
Right. So what I'll say to that is, I realized this time around, I'm like, I see what this is doing now. I'm like, this is not an indictment on people who do this sort of stuff necessarily, because I think that the filmmakers and the screenwriters in this case are smart enough to understand that people, unfortunately, are going to do this because this is just what happens to certain people. What the movie is actually doing is it is an indictment of us for glorifying this stuff by continuing to watch it. That's what I think it's going for. And that's what I missed the first time around, which is it's like it is holding a mirror up to us. It is being like, yeah, you can sit here and say that this is all fucked up as much as you can, but at the same time, at the exact same time, exactly. If they were to actually, if this were based on a real life thing, and if they were to make a real movie about this, we would watch it in a fucking heartbeat.
It's like
if Netflix were to, exactly, if the movie that Natalie Portman is filming at the end of this, right? If they were to put that movie out on Netflix tomorrow, everybody and their mother would be watching it.
Yeah.
Everybody would be saying it's glorifying this, yada, yada, yada. And it's like, guess what? They made this because we knew you people would watch it, because people like what, and I think that's
we're into this true crime.
Exactly. Look at all the true crime craze that happened on Netflix in 2019, because I think that the perfect way to sum up not only this movie but all three movies that we've been talking about on this podcast and why we love watching this stuff is because people like watching depraved shit. Not everything is sunshine and rainbows. Nobody is good. People like watching depraved shit. And if I'm being completely honest, everybody that calls out movies like this for glorifying this stuff, for the most part, is a little bit of a hypocrite, because at the end of the day, the stuff is intriguing because we find it interesting. If we didn't find this stuff interesting, they wouldn't make movies about this, but we do. Now, that being said, like I said, if this were a worse, weaker movie that, like you said, was trying to openly glorify Julianne Moore and Charles Melton's relationship, then I would be singing a completely different tune. But I don't think the movie ever does, because the movie is at, from the opening scene when Natalie Portman first arrives there, is telling you, no, everybody that is around them does not like this and knows that this is not normal, you know? Even some of their closest friends are being like,
and knowing
this
the fact that they grew up, the kid grew up in the town where this crime took place, and people around her are like trying to feel like bad for her, because that's why like Julianne's Moore character, she does a lot of baking, and people will place orders for like a cake.
Right.
Sometimes they cancel, like what we see in the film. And it's like, you know, some people are just not comfortable with her presence there. And I'm just shocked she didn't be like, you know, we should move. And the fact that, you know, she did have the relationship after she got out of, you know, her time in the jailhouse. And, you know, it's like, you know, the kid chose to be with her. And you know.
Right. Which I don't even like.
I don't like either, and I think that's like it's interesting for the story, but I don't like that personally. When I was like looking at my own thoughts, and I was like, no.
Yeah, but the biggest thing to me,
the biggest thing that comes out of it though is Charles Melton.
Melton, exactly.
And I think that's his performance is 10 times better than Julianne Moore's and Natalie Portman. They're both very good, but it's Charles Melton's character who ultimately like shines. And he just won the award for New York for that. And this is just a guarantee. at this point he could get nominated.
He will get nominated. I'm fairly convinced of it, especially because I think that the reason why his character is the most interesting is, like I said, very similar to Thomasin Mckenzie's performance, but in a completely different show of it. It is a character who realizes that he has been kept in a cage, and he's only now starting to realize it at 36 years of age, because you see it in the conversations with his dad, you see it when he sleeps with Natalie Portman's character, you see it with the interaction with his son on the roof, where again he got into this thinking he's like, oh yeah, I'm set for life, because again, if he gets into it as a 13-year-old kid, again, as somebody who was a 13-year-old boy at one point, I completely understand the mentality. He's like, yeah, I'm getting into it with this, super rich woman, she's going to take care of me. I'm never going to have to work a day in my life, and I just get free sex out of it. It's like a win-win-win across the board. But now that he's older and is on the other side of it and has the benefit of hindsight, and now because the whole thing, right, is that the whole thing that is expressed is that, what is it? He growing up, he was friends with Julianne Moore's son from her first marriage, right?
And so they got a job at a pet store.
They both got a job at a pet store, right? But what I'm saying is that, right, so Julianne Moore has other kids as well that now also have kids that are about to go off to college, right? And her and Charles Melton's two kids, they have twins that are about to graduate high school and are about to go off to college. So now he's about to be in a position where he's like, oh no, I no longer have any barriers between myself and Julianne Moore.
Yeah.
And like, that's kind of like the final indication of him realizing is like, that's the final true loss of innocence, because at the very least, even if he realized it, he may have been able to preserve some of that innocence with the raising of their kids, because again, he's closer to them in age than their mom is, like you got to assume, right, they say at the beginning of the movie, he's 36 and the kids are about to graduate high school, so you got to assume they're 17, 18, so
and he's getting along with his kids too, given how young they are, given the scene on the roof.
Right, but you think about that and you're like, yeah, I'm like, he was not that much older than them growing up, because his oldest is in college, so you got to assume she's like 20, 21. That's what, a 10, 11 year difference. So when that old kid was 15, he was probably only 26, 27. That's not that much of a difference.
It really isn't.
It really, really isn't. It seems like a lot when you are that age, because you're a 15-year-old looking at a 20-year-old, whatever, and you still have a lot of growing physically and mentally and all that. But just in its pure numbers wise, it's not that big of an age difference. So just kind of the mental grappling that movie does. And then you get into Natalie Portman's character and just her motivations in general, because the movie doesn't exactly tap into her need or motivation as far as why she wants to pursue and play this character. But that's where, again, a lot of the celebrity and indictments of us, because that's where we get into the other side of thing, right? The Hollywood side of it, right? Where Hollywood, I think it's safe to say, is comprised of largely depraved people. It's why we get the movies that we get. It's why we get the stories that we get. But in terms of just capturing, for lack of a better word, all of the negative stereotypes that actors have been known for, but more of the depraved side, not just so much the egotistical and narcissist sides, but more so just the whole, oh my God, what kind of unresolved trauma and shit have you just not been able to grapple with, the only way that you know how to grapple with it is to pursue these really dark and messed up performances,
Yeah, and that alone is the messed up performances, is the trauma that, Charles has.
Yes,
as
exactly. Especially given that the two of them do end up hooking up. And
that was definitely the scene that really is one of the best scenes in the film, besides the mirror scenes that Julianne Moore and Natalie Portman have in the mirrors. There's a couple times where they have mirror scenes, which I think are the true standout points. And then the time when Charles and Natalie Portman hook up, and then it's they talk, and it's he lets it out, and that's where you really see that side in this side to Charles, as an actor.
Yes.
You never really seen before, because he's known as one of the Riverdale kids.
Right, exactly.
He replaced Ross Butler on the show, and then he went on to do some other things. In fact, he was on an episode of Poker Face. If you remember, he was on The Drive.
Yes, he was in Bad Boys for Life. That was the first thing I saw him in.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes,
yeah. I think I remember him. He was in that, but I didn't see Bad Boys for Life because.
Another fun fact actually about him. that I, just a little point of pride. So the talent agency that I went through that resulted in me getting to my school, the neighborhood playhouse, it's called Applause Rising Talent. Just wanted to give them a shout out. Charles Melton actually went through that agency as well. So
amazing.
Yep. So that's another little connection. I didn't put two and two together because I saw him. I'm like, wait a minute, he looks familiar. Then I checked. I'm like, oh, that was the guy in Bad Boys for Life, And so I remember that from a couple years ago. So that was just like another interesting little tidbit. So like I said, I haven't finished it entirely, but I can already say that, like, after the rewatch and just getting so much more from it this time than I just did the first time, I already bumped it up. This is a 4.5 out of 5, and this may make my top 10 of the year, which, again, I am the biggest fucking hypocrite on the planet. I admit it. We'll see if I feel the same way about The Killer. I don't think I will, but I could always be wrong. But and Ferrari, because I'm going to rewatch Ferrari when that comes out at Christmas as well. But yeah, I am very much enjoying it. I'm very much looking forward to it. And like I said, it may have a spot on the top 10. I
don't know if I'm going to see Ferrari. I've seen a lot of people say the same results you had when going to that screening. So for me,
yes,
I'm trying to look back from my review what I gave this film. I think I gave it like a 6.5. Because I really Charles Melton really saved it for me. I just think the direction brought me, a 5.5. I was really, really shitting on that film. I'm so sorry. But like maybe now if we talk about more, it might be higher up. But right now it's at like a low score for me because I just wasn't a fan of the direction from, Todd Haynes, and knowing that this is like for me his weaker film, and I know he's done great things with Julianne Moore. Safe is so good. If you haven't seen Safe, it's definitely a watch from Julianne Moore herself.
Yeah, Todd Haynes is one that I still definitely, I feel like, have to get into just more so as a director, because I remember I tried Carol a couple years ago. It was the same thing. I was really tired. I fell asleep during it.
Dark Waters. Carol is excellent. Dark Waters
kind of seem kind of mediocre. I know people love his documentaries, Velvet Goldmine and then The Velvet Underground.
Yeah, he is a big documentary guy. He Christine Vachon is like a longtime producer who has worked with him. He has speaking of which, there's a great book I recommend everybody it's called The Killer Room. It's not on this book, my shelf, but it's on my other bookshelf. Excellent book. And it talks about her producing and working with Todd Haynes. So recommend that. They're a great producing partnership together. So
also, Todd Haynes also directed the 2007 Bob Marley esque biopic, Not There, as well as the 2011 miniseries Mildred Pierce with Kate Winslet.
Yep. Yeah. I only know of Todd Haynes because from going to graduate school, he was a friend to a lot of the professors that I had. So I just know him from a lot of work from studying him. So this for me, from knowing his greats, this is like lower for me. And I'm kind of bummed that I'm not in the appreciation or love for like, everybody else has.
Like I said, it'll be interesting compared to, like I said, some of my other favorites of the year. Like I said, I'm going to be very, very interested to see where this ranks in my overall filmography of the year once I finish it. Because let me tell you something, 2023 has been one of the most back and forth years overall, but it is a year that overall, finally, again, kind of sort of brought back a lot of the fun to me of movies.
Definitely. I can say that as like a film goer myself. It's been really interesting to take my husband to see certain high profile directors we've been getting now, returning to work since the pandemic and having like their films moved around, like pushed around. I didn't take.
And also, you just look at the caliber of directors that have put out movies this year, regardless of where you rank on them. We had movies this year from, again, Chris Nolan, Greta Gerwig, Martin Scorsese, David Fincher, Yorgos Lanthimos, Todd Haynes, Jonathan Glazer, finally for the first time since 2014. What's it called? So so many others.
David Fincher with
Craig Gillespie.
We're gonna have Taika. We had Taika Waititi, which I didn't get to see with the next cool ones. Even though he did have Thor, that was just a disappointment from what a lot of people saw. So I didn't see Next Goal Wins, but
I started watching Next Goal Wins. That's another one I've yet to finish. But again, I don't want to rule Taika out completely just because of some bad Marvel movies.
I feel like it's an interesting time with like what we saw with Barbenheimer, and you can kind of say what Killers of the Flower Moon, like the movie, going to the movies of like, the excitement of movies is definitely back for the year of 2023.
Absolutely.
And a lot of theater markets are really starting to look at the essence of, filmmaking and getting those big profile directors in.
Finally.
Yeah, which is great,
Yeah, it's needed. It's needed in order to continue the ecosystem of film going, because as we've seen, as this past summer proved, they cannot depend on the blockbusters. The franchise that they keep going back to over and over again.
Where
they
says
just can't depend on them.
Have to make yourself as a director and make it like yourself, like a Greta. You have to make yourself like a Nolan, like a Scorsese, or even like
and that's also what's
Todd Haynes, because this was shown in theaters before it hit Netflix.
And that's also what's going to be interesting going into 2024 as well, which I know that slate is going to be affected very, very heavily by the strike as well. I think even more so than the fall slate this year, where again you've got some interesting and different kinds of continuations of blockbusters. You've got Godzilla versus Kong 2, The New Empire. You've got a new Planet of the Apes movie. You've got a new Lord of the Rings movie. You've got
Marley movie coming out.
Sonic 3. But you've also got a lot of movies from, like, again, some other of our favorite filmmakers. You have Alex Garland's next movie, I believe, supposedly. Oh my God, Ari Aster's next movie with Joaquin Phoenix will come out next year. Although that more likely get pushed. Nosferatu from Robert Eggers has a release date, along with Jordan Peele's untitled fourth film.
We have Dune 2, don't forget.
Dune 2 in March. Bong Joon-ho's next movie, Mickey 17.
I'm so excited for that.
To name a few. So yeah, The Fall Guy from David Leitch with Ryan Gosling, which is going to be the new movie that kicks off the fall. So yeah, we've got some stuff to look forward to. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting.
Stuff to look forward to, but it's going to be so interesting with the strike. But I feel like films like the Oscar stuff that's going to come out like in January, or some of the stuff that's going to come out like in the spring, we should be okay with, Dune and Fall Guy, and, we'll have summer, and it'll be an interesting summer, because that's when of course, the strike gets really affected. So
yes, exactly. So we will be keeping track of all of that and more. But for right now, like I said, we have 3 more episodes of the podcasting year of 2023. Next weekend, Dustin and I are going to be recapping Poor Things, The Boy and the Heron, Leave the World Behind, and The Zone of Interest. And the following weekend, I will be talking about one of the strangest double holiday drops of all time with Wonka and Anyone But You. And then we will be wrapping it up with our 4-part podcast finale. Again, something unlike anything.
Ironclaw, no Zac Efron.
Well, we are getting to that again. So for the finale, I'll tell you this, because I've been telling everybody in the last couple of episodes that we've done. We are doing something different that we've never done before for the podcast. We are doing a 4-part finale, 4 mini episodes, 1 episode each day, about probably going to be about 30 to 40 minutes each, where we talk about each of the big holiday drops. So we have it: Aquaman 2, Rebel Moon, Maestro, and The Iron Claw. We're going to be talking about all 4 of those movies, and then they will be cobbled together into one big, probably hour-and-a-half long episode that will be dropped probably sometime between Christmas and New Year's, and then that will be it until we come back in 2024 in order to do our usual January drops. And like I said, as of right now, the January drops we have top 10 movies and TV shows, which we do every year, and then we will also be doing Percy Jackson and Masters of the Air for when that drops as well. So we still have plenty of content to cover before the end of the year is done. We are not even close to being done yet. But Kristen, thank you for coming on to talk about these movies. I had an absolute blast. Again, you're one of the Talking TV OGs. Couldn't ask for anything more of you, and can't wait to have you on for more episodes in the new year. Where could the good people follow you on the interwebs?
Well, the good people can follow me on my podcast, the MK Productions Podcast, co-hosted by my best friend Mac. Shout out to Mac. And you can find me on Instagram with reviews, on TikTok, and reviews on my Instagram. And that's at Miss Filmingo. And then I'm also, of course, doing other stuff, lots of interviews, and attending virtual film festivals, and doing all sorts of fun stuff. So please go check me out there if you want some more interesting, fun stuff from me.
Absolutely. And of course, you can follow me with everything going on at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms. Be sure to follow the official Talking TV podcast across all platforms. Subscribe to us if you're watching us on YouTube. Follow us on Twitch. This episode will be available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts tomorrow. And as always, people, 12 seasons in a short film, and watch more fucking movies. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
For more Awards Watch.